Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you here. I think you are just such a great leader. You're such a great person to know, and you have really great insight as well in the field of therapy and counseling and in disability advocacy as well. So I think this conversation will be wonderful today. I'm super excited for people to hear what you have to say. So yeah, it'll be great. So welcome everyone. This is In This Together. This is where different professionals within the special education and mental health field, they come together. We offer resources, insight, and ideas to each other, and mostly support. We offer support to each other, and the purpose of this is really to build a community. So I'm super excited about Lauren. Lauren, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us all about you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm really honored to be here, Natalie, and I love that you do these live conversations. We need more dialogue in the field of disability advocacy and building meaningful connections. And so I'm really honored to be here. I think my story really begins when I was growing up. I started using a power wheelchair when I was 5 years old. I was born with muscular dystrophy, diagnosed at age 2, then used a wheelchair starting at age 5. And I was really lucky. I grew up in a really small town. It was almost like living in a little bubble where I had so much support, and I really was given resources and opportunities. And I never saw myself as having a disability. I always just saw myself as having, a wheelchair, but I didn't know what disability identity was. I didn't know what ableism was. I didn't really understand that there were stereotypes in the world or inaccessibility because I was lucky. But then, I think going off to college, realizing that there are so many barriers going to college. I need assistance with activities of daily living, and that was a huge challenge. I didn't know how I was going to get around the campus on my own. There were so many things when I was looking at college options that really opened my eyes to, wait a minute, there are so many stereotypes and barriers and systems at play that are not accessible. And that's when I really grew in my passion for disability advocacy. Starting in those college years, I started learning about what ableism is, what microaggressions are, and I was exposed to people outside of my small town bubble for the first time, where I realized that not everyone is going to accept me and not everyone is going to understand my differences. And I became really fascinated with empowerment, resiliency, how humans adapt to these things like oppression and limitations and feeling misunderstood. I started to feel really misunderstood, and I majored in sociology, but I was also taking a lot of psychology classes and realized very quickly that I'm so passionate about mental health. And so I started looking into services in the community for kids, adults, families affected by disabilities. And there is a real gap in the community. Yeah. There are so many people and families and parents of children with disabilities that have told me that they maybe have gone to a mental health counselor, but have felt like they kind of spend a lot of the time just educating the clinician on what it means to have a disability, what it means to feel misunderstood with a disability, or to have to advocate for yourself all the time and fight for your equal rights, and how that is so exhausting and draining. And so I just started learning these stories of, people that have disabilities of all types, not just wheelchair users, but those with any type of disability or learning challenge or difference or sensory condition or chronic illness. They often don't have really safe spaces to talk about their vulnerability and their identity and experiences with the limitations that they face, because a lot of times non-disabled people might be uncomfortable talking about those subjects, or they might not know how to respond, or they might feel sorry for the individual, or not really know how to empathize. It maybe comes across more as pity or just not really knowing. And so I became a psychotherapist because I really want to fill that gap. I really want to be that person that that is talking about these subjects and that is the expert on the intersection of mental health and disability. Because, and I'm sorry, I'm just sharing so much right off the bat.
I love it. I love it.
But I just feel like becoming a therapist, doing this work in the mental health field and writing about these topics and speaking about these topics it means everything to me. It's the world, because we have to continue making that space where individuals with disabilities or their family members can feel not defined by the disability. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel like it's okay. You don't have to be strong all the time, despite what the world may want you to be, the strong, inspirational person with a disability. You don't have to pretend like you're not grieving the loss of ability or feeling, anxiety or depression.
Yeah.
I want people to have that safe space. And that's why I'm so passionate about this.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I love, what you're saying, just a safe space for someone with a disability, and you have the experience. And so you come at it from a different way, and you get to streamline. Like, you don't have to go through all the education with a client. Like, they just get to immediately come in and get right to work. Right? It's not like, walk you through the history of my disability and what this looks like, what the experience feels like. It's like you are already meeting them at the center to start the work. And I think that's really powerful. And I think it, when you explain it, you're like, I love it. Like, I hear you talk about it, I'm like, this is your life's purpose. Like, that's what it sounds like to me. It's like, this is, you are just so like good at it. Yeah. I love that.
I honestly like resonate so much with what you said with, people can come in and they connect with me in a way that they haven't connected with a non-disabled therapist in the past. Right. And I'm not saying that I know everything. Like, I certainly don't. And that's the number one thing that I say at the beginning is, your life story will be different than mine. Right. We come from different families. We come from different backgrounds, our school experiences, the towns that we grew up in, the resources that we were able to have. I don't expect to know what your reality is like. I want to lean on you as the expert. I put every single client in that position of, you're in charge. This is your space. This is about you. This is not about me. Whatever you want to talk about today, I will accept and honor, because that's your experience and that's your time. And I want you to teach me what your life is like and what your feelings are. So I always like to just preface that at the beginning that, we may both use a power wheelchair. We may both have muscular dystrophy. We may both come from a small town where we didn't really learn about disability stuff until college. Our perspectives could still be totally opposite, right? It doesn't, I totally recognize that even though we may have the same diagnosis or the same family dynamics that are similar, your feelings with mental health and empowerment and adaptation and resiliency and your life goals and who you want to be in the world could be very different than mine. Even terminology, we could use different, disabled person with a disability, person with different abilities or special needs. And it's not my place to decide what's right for them. This is their life. And I think that we really need to just continue to honor, this is their life. This is not for professionals to decide how they want to identify. This is not for professionals to say, you're probably feeling this way because of this. No, you tell me how you're feeling. Let me learn from you. And let me see if I can help you understand yourself better, have more insight, learn some coping skills to manage the things that you're facing, and maybe brainstorm some ways that you can feel more empowered. But I think that's so critical, is that we really need to be listening to our clients, our patients, our service providers, and things that we're interacting with.
For sure. Yeah, that's so beautiful. I picture it as kind of like the the mental and emotional equivalent of like, that they always say like, oh, you don't want to be like standing over someone or like on a higigher like quote unquote level of someone, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's the same thing. It's like you're meeting them literally at eye level and you're saying like, listen, like we're starting at the same spot, and I'm here for you just as much as you're here for me. And I think that's really beautiful. I think a lot of times it can happen over time with like psychotherapists that they could over time maybe like I don't know, maybe get burnt out. Maybe that's what it leads to. And then it's like, rather than listening and saying, let me, like they have all the solutions already. And it's like, no, like you have the solutions inside of you. We just need to get there together. So I think
absolutely.
that's beautiful. Yeah.
And like you said, like therapists are people too. Burnout is a real thing. And that's why I have to be really intentional about my self-care and monitoring, like, am I getting overwhelmed? Am I getting too triggered? And, thankfully I've had many years to sort of master what self-care looks like for me. And so I feel like I have a really good balance of that. But just again, to your point of, we really have to make sure that we're showing up for our clients and our patients and the people that we're serving. And if we are noticing those feelings of burnout where maybe we're starting to make some assumptions or starting to generalize an experience.
Or fill in, to get to the solution quicker. Yeah,
it's really critical for all professionals to monitor that. I think that's really important. And more than anything, it is common for many people with disabilities to feel left out, to feel isolated, to feel misunderstood, to feel maybe angry, frustrated with their just being diagnosed or, not having a lot of opportunities to talk about it. So we can acknowledge that there are many common themes, right? And those themes can be useful to us in session or in the work that we do. We can be aware of some common experiences, but we don't want to use those common experiences to blanket treat everyone to just, to just say, well, I know that people with disabilities feel isolated, so you're feeling that way. No, maybe they're not feeling that way. Maybe they don't fit in, and that is a trend, but again, maybe people don't fit into that trend, and we have to be educated on what the trends are. I want to educate the world on, the intersection of disability and mental health, things to look out for, things that are common. I want to speak on these subjects, but I don't want to educate people with the assumption that they need to be, holding those so tightly that they're just using those common trends all the time. So there's a balance between, knowing the information, being knowledgeable and skilled, but also taking that with a grain of salt and not assuming anything in treatment.
Yeah, I love that. Not immediately putting someone in a box, I think is really, that's really powerful. So you mentioned something that I think could be really beneficial for providers to hear. You talked about self-care. So what does your how do you practice self-care and what does that look like for you, like to avoid burnout? I think that's could be really here.
Of course. So a lot of times on social media and in articles and magazines, we see self-care as taking a whole spa day for yourself or having a bubble bath and champagne. And it's made out to be this luxury that sets it in our mind that it's not really attainable for us. Like, we don't have time to do something like that. We don't have time to take a whole day off. So I want to reframe this for everyone listening. Self-care does not need to be extravagant or expensive or luxurious. Self-care can be 5 minutes in your backyard just listening to the nature sounds of what's around you. Self-care can be, going to bed 20 minutes early so you can listen to your favorite music just under the covers and be calm. Self-care might be, taking your lunch break outside just so you can get some fresh air. It might be calling a friend to check in and really process your day. It may be, going outside and taking your dog for a walk or cuddling with your pet inside. Self-care can be any number of things, and it doesn't need to be all time consuming, right? We always say, we don't have time for self-care. We don't have time for that. using a fidget toy can be self-care, just taking a break. Rather than taking our 5 minutes of scrolling through Facebook or Instagram, take your 5 minutes and just turn off your phone and take some deep breaths and maybe get a glass of water and wash your face off or change into some more comfortable clothing. It's about doing the little things that can help us feel better. So I really like lighting candles and listening to soft acoustic music in my room, where I'm just kind of away from everyone. I also like watching movies. So I might just make time to watch a movie, even if it's in the middle of the afternoon. If I have, even half an hour, I'll just start watching something. And it feels like, okay, I really should be productive. I should probably go do something else.
Yeah.
But if you don't prioritize it, it will be neglected. And how can we show up for anyone if we're not taking care of ourselves? So I really encourage people to journal about what makes them feel better. It could be anything. It could be doing a puzzle, right? It could be just taking pictures on their phone of things in the city. It could just be going for a drive, whatever helps them foster just a little bit of joy, a little bit of happiness, even if it's only 10 minutes a day. I think that's really important. And also remember that self-care can also be choosing to say no to something, choosing to set a boundary, choosing to ask for help. Yeah, like I mentioned, a lot of like activity focused types of self-care, but taking a hot shower, journaling, coloring. I love coloring. But it's not just those activities. It's also about creating intentional decisions every day where if you know that this is going to be too much on your plate, honor that and say no. You're not responsible for taking care of other people or worrying about if they're going to be disappointed by your decision. You're responsible for your care, your mental health. So if you need to say no, if you need to set a boundary, if you need to ask for help to maybe get a little bit of help with something, especially those of us with jobs and maybe you have kids and, lots of family stuff going on, ask for help. Really think about that. Ask yourself, why hasn't my self-care been made a priority? What am I valuing over my self-care right now? And how can I make even just one small change? Maybe it's a commitment to getting more sleep. That could be a form of self-care. Or even choosing to eat healthier, to eat breakfast instead of just skipping it, or actually having a balanced diet, So it doesn't have to be, extravagant. It could just be getting a little more exercise, getting a little more sleep.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for all of that. I think that for me, self-care starts with listening to my body, to my mind, like how am I feeling today? And then, I love that you're talking about these smaller things. Like it doesn't have to be these big extravagant, weekends away. Like that's just not possible,
No, it's not for everyone.
Yeah. And so I like that, those smaller bits of self-care and finding joy and finding peace during the day or at night. It's like finding joy in the little things, which is amazing. And it's building sustainability. It's creating a sustainable life. Like rather than, having
going on a trip like once every few months, no, like why don't you just create a life that you don't have to escape from? Create a life where you can be sustainable. We love going on our trips every once in a while, but it's not healthy to burn yourself out so much, like you said, and then find relief on one weekend. Want to. I love that you said that about sustainability. It's better for you.
Like this is life. Like, this is the life. It's not like, oh, I go on this trip in 2 weeks. It's like, no, like your life is the 2 weeks, even before the trip. Like, how can you find ways to just enjoy every day, no matter how busy you are, no matter how many hours you're working, how can you fit in? It's also like what you make time for. Like you can prioritize your time in a different way. And I think that's also a privilege to be able to do that, to have self-care. So we could talk about that for a whole other day, I'm sure. But I would love to hear about River Oaks and talk to us about how this originated, your vision.
Yeah, so like I said, I always was extremely passionate about mental health, and I knew that I wanted to be a therapist. And so I got, my MSW, and got fully, got the licensing all figured out. And then I was looking at jobs, and I was trying to decide, do I want to work for a disability organization? Do I want to work for a mental health agency? What is my vision? How do I want my career to look? And I realized pretty quickly that I want the creative freedom of reaching as many people as I can by becoming my own boss, by deciding what my goals are for that year in terms of speaking engagements or published articles or how many clients I want to take on in that given time of the year. So River Oak Psychology is my baby, my exciting journey of being able to reach as many people as I can with the total freedom of making connections and not being limited to maybe the small scope of an organization that which maybe I would be employed through. I wanted to set myself up to be able to grow based on community needs, client needs. Client needs are always changing and evolving and growing. I mean, we've seen this past year with the pandemic that our mental health needs have changed a lot. The way that we do therapy now with telehealth, which I'm providing, is different than in the years past. And River Oak Psychology is my mission to be able to grow myself and continue developing myself in whatever ways that I see fit as the community responds to different things going on in our lives.
Yeah.
River Oaks is actually the neighborhood that I grew up on. It's the street name where my parents have lived for over 25 years.
Oh, cool.
I grew up there, and I actually started my career there with the pandemic and everything because our lives have been uprooted and changed. And so when I found myself back at River Oaks neighborhood, I thought, it's funny how life gives us curveballs. It's funny how I ended up back here when I started my business. So that's sort of the origin of it. And I provide telehealth, mental health counseling for anybody in the state of Michigan because I'm only licensed in Michigan. However, I also provide wellness coaching or other forms of mental health education on an individual basis for anybody throughout the world. So anywhere in the United States. It's different than psychotherapy in the sense that with coaching, I'm not going to be providing you with a diagnosis. I'm not going to be working with your psychiatric provider or any other healthcare professionals for you. I'm not going to be writing a treatment plan for depression, anxiety, personality disorder, OCD, things like that. However, I am going to be intimately working with you and building a relationship in the same way that I would be building a relationship in therapy. The content of our sessions will look a little differently, and it's not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment,
Right.
but it does allow people to learn about themselves, their wellness needs, how to build empowered lives, how to set and create and achieve goals, how to build better relationships, how to live better, essentially. So, yeah, and I also run support groups for disability organizations throughout the United States. I'm a partner with the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, and that's been a wonderful experience. And I've partnered with other disability networks and the Muscular Dystrophy Association, the Littlest Tumor Foundation. I really enjoy that because that's the thing about, being my own boss is that I can go to them and serve their needs for whatever they might want. If they want to have, a support group that is facilitated by someone that lives firsthand with a disability, I can do that and not be limited in a box because I'm building my own career, which is exciting and scary in the beginning, but it's everything that I've ever dreamed of, and it's really allowing me to fulfill my dreams and purpose.
Yes, that's so amazing. I love the community piece to it. And,
Mm.
if you were working under an employer, it would be like here, your outreach
Mhm.
and your impact, and obviously still very important, right?
Sure.
Now you get to just grow and into all these different avenues in
Right.
mental health, and I think that's really cool. And I definitely think within the field, as River Oak psychology grows, I think, and as your career grows, like I can
Mm.
see this being like a really just like the
Thank you.
way to like kind of change the field of mental health. Like later, the impact of this, it will show, your hard work will show, and when the field starts to
Thank you.
change with wellness and education and just therapy in general. So I think that's wonderful. Um,
Aw, thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. I do have a question about the wellness
Mhm.
coaching. So what does like an initial session look like? Like
Mhm.
the first time a client comes in, what does that look like for them?
Yeah, so it's really a conversation about what they want to get out of this, what their expectations are, why they've started this, what brought them to this. I love to just get to know people. I love to make people feel welcome. And I want it to be a very warm conversation. Sometimes, in services or in mental health treatment, there's tons of paperwork and an assessment. And true, I do go through some general questions to help me understand themselves better, but I don't want it to feel like a formal question and answer
Right.
hour long assessment where, it doesn't feel natural. So I really do my best to welcome someone, congratulate them on starting this process, and learn about them, learn about what brought them here, but also what their life is like. What are some of the things that they do for wellness currently? And where are some of the areas that they feel like they are missing? What is their support system like? What is their day to day like? Are they in school? Are they working? Are they engaging in the community in some way? So I really put them in that driver's seat and we create goals together. So
Yeah.
once we, learn about what they're looking for, everything is tailored to them. I don't put people in a box. I really go by what they want. And this is similar to the psychotherapy in Michigan. My mental health practice in Michigan, where I do the mental health treatment, of course, there is more of a treatment plan and there are goals to follow, but I still position my clients as collaborators in that. I'm not going to create a treatment plan for someone in psychotherapy unless it is they're in agreement of that and that they also feel like that will be serving to them in the best way possible. And so for wellness coaching outside of Michigan and anywhere in the world, it mirrors that process. It's very similar. We develop a plan for what goals we want to talk about. We talk about the frequency of sessions. We talk about, how we can best work together. And I make sure that they're a collaborator with me and that they're driving this. The other thing, too, is, in both cases, psychotherapy or wellness coaching or support groups or anything, I always like to ask, what do you need from me? How can I best serve you? What is the style of, um, service providing that you like? Do you like a very direct approach with a lot of structure? Would you like to use a lot of handouts with me, a lot of worksheets? Would you like homework assignments from week to week? Do you want journal prompts that I can give you? And some people say, yes, I need that structure. That structure is going to be really good for me. I need to be type A organized. And some
Yeah.
people say, right? And some people say, no, this is just my self-care. I just need space to talk. I need an outlet. I need to process my life. I need to feel safe expressing my emotions. I need to feel safe just talking. I don't want a lot of structure. I just want to show up and talk about how I'm feeling that week and what's getting in the way of my self-care or my empowerment or what frustrations I'm feeling. I just need support. And I respect that. Everyone's going to want a different level of interactions and structure in our work together. And that's typically what a first session looks like, is just kind of getting to know each other, talking through these expectations and figuring out how I can best serve them. So it's a lot of reflection for me too. It's a lot of absorbing what they're giving me, and also being really intentional about how I can show up for them in the best way possible.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I love the you're finding a clear inventory of the person. Like you're like, okay, like let's really I want a really clear picture of who you are before we take the next step. And I think that's really cool. So Lauren, for those listening, Lauren wrote a really wonderful blog for the Notes by Natalie blog. I published it there. It's about disabilities, COVID-19, and the challenges that someone with a disability would face during the pandemic. So I think this is such an important topic. And honestly, when I read it, I was like, whoa, these are things that I have not even thought about, right? Like I had not even thought about these barriers that someone with a disability would experience during the pandemic. So can you, explain that a little bit more? Like, what are some of the challenges that you've seen,
Sure.
and how can we move forward by improving these, and helping with these challenges, by improving legislation and all the things that disability? Like, there's so many different topics under. Yeah, I'll let you go. Take it away.
This is a very extensive topic, so I'm just going to touch on it as concisely as possible. And then, of course, if anyone listening would like to reach out to me to have further in-depth conversations, I would love to connect with you. But some of the main issues are short staff. I'm an individual that requires some assistance with getting out of bed in the morning, assisting me with daily living stuff. And I lost all of my caregivers when the pandemic started because everybody sort of quit their job, right? Yeah. They got on unemployment. And I'm not alone in that. Many of my clients with disabilities who have caregivers or service providers that come into their home, they can't find staff right now. Everybody is short staffed. We're going to extreme measures to advertise and recruit and spread word of mouth. And, it's just really hard because nobody is working in the home healthcare field right now, or very few people are. And a big driving force behind that is also the Medicaid policies. The Medicaid policies only pay anywhere from $8 to $12 per hour for a home health care worker who is often doing some of the same things that a nurse in a hospital would do. Right. And so it's really, really tough for our society in the United States. I can't speak to every state, but in Michigan, it's devastating for families that rely on these home healthcare workers, these caregivers, these providers that come into the home and help someone with their basic needs. I'm not talking about, luxurious services. This is someone that helps me get out of bed in the morning and shower and get dressed and use the bathroom. These are my basic needs. Right. And someone can make more money in the fast food industry or in retail rather than caring for an individual. And so that's really upsetting that Medicaid does pay such low wages. And with the pandemic, there was no incentive anymore because the unemployment is much higher than these wages. So it's tough. A lot of clients have had to move back home with family. A lot of clients have had to go into group homes or nursing homes, leaving their home because they haven't been able to find quality staff to come into their homes during the pandemic and help them live their life. So that's just, individuals that require some caregiving assistance. But let's talk about individuals that are independent with their caregiving, but maybe rely on public transit, right, to get around. Yeah. That's all been, in much shorter supply. With the pandemic, a lot of services in the community have been shut down. So, even for individuals that do live independently and can, take care of themselves independently, they still rely on some service providers in the community, like transportation or programs or things that they access that are no longer being offered. For individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing that rely on lip reading. So these individuals so someone's wearing a mask. How can you communicate that way when
Right.
when you rely on lip reading? I mean, the whole sector of accessible communication alone has been challenging during this pandemic for individuals that want to receive updated information on COVID-19 in an accessible format are often struggling because captions may not be available on every online video for updates on COVID, or there may be articles that are not conducive for screen readers for those with visual impairment. So just accessible communication has been very difficult. Um, Individuals that may rely on touching services more, like for those with visual impairments, like they need to feel things in order to be able to access their environment and their community. And so it's been harder to have touchless everything now
Right.
because it's just harder. So there have been quite a few shortcomings in this pandemic for individuals with disabilities, and it's been really tough. And there are so many other examples, and there are so many other things that make it really hard for individuals with disabilities to practice social distancing simply because they have to be around people or they have to rely on services, and those are changed dramatically.
Yeah.
Um, on the other hand, a lot of times we have seen that it's made the world more accessible with virtual opportunities now because some
Mhm.
individuals with disabilities have not been able to access their employment or the community in past years prior to the pandemic because people have said, no, this can't be done remotely. No, like there can't be a virtual um, work arrangement, or
Right.
you're not invited to this thing because it's not accessible. Well, now there's no excuse for not inviting someone somewhere or giving them an opportunity to work just because they need to do it from home. Millions of people are working from home right now, almost more effectively in some cases,
Right.
because they don't need to get burned out by the commute morning and night. They don't need to waste time in traffic. They don't need to feel more physically fatigued by going to an office with so many other people who maybe someone has social anxiety. Maybe they don't like the pressure of being in a very busy corporate office. Maybe they work better from home. So even psychiatric disabilities, right? Like someone with really strong social anxiety probably is having an easier time now working remotely than going into the office Monday through Friday for a normal 9 to 5,
Yeah.
myself included. So I have muscle fatigue in the mornings. I have days where I have a lot more energy than other days. So I don't work 9 to 5. I mean, I would not be able to work 9 to 5 Monday
Right.
through Friday. It would not be possible. And so I'm lucky in the sense that, I'm building my career as an entrepreneur, but I want to see employers give those same schedule flexibilities to people that will say, mornings are really tough for me. I get migraines, or I have a lot of physical fatigue, or I have energy issues. I want employers to be able to say, that's totally fine. As long as you're getting the work done, you work the hours that you can work,
Yeah.
and we have to really ask ourselves why this was such an impossibility before the pandemic. Like, why did we not allow for these types of accommodations and flexible work arrangements and service deliveries before? Some people don't drive. Some people with epilepsy are not able to drive, or other chronic illnesses. So getting groceries or getting things out in the community is really challenging for those individuals. So really expand your definition of disability and want you to include chronic illnesses as well.
Yeah.
It's not just a wheelchair user. There's like over 1 billion people in the world with some type of disability that makes something challenging for them that they have to accommodate. And so our society now, as a result of the pandemic, is more accommodating. We have people that are more willing to work with people and to say, oh, that's fair. Okay, it's a pandemic. We'll make arrangements. That's more justified.
Right. Why did
But
it
when
take a pandemic for that to happen, though? You know?
right, right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's so much work to do.
Yeah. And then, the other consideration here too, really quick, is just I don't want to go in that direction so far to where we say, oh, the building doesn't have to be accessible. That person can just work from home. We don't need to have an elevator here.
Right.
Or we don't need to have public transit. People with disabilities can just work and socialize remotely for all eternity. It's like, I don't want to move in that direction of remote stuff so much to the point that we regress in our community accessibility. I want there to be options for people with disabilities to access their entire communities if they so choose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I am so grateful to be a part of this conversation because I think there's just so much work to do with accessibility options, accommodations, and from employers, but also just out in the community as well. And I don't know how you started, but it seems like to me you're starting the conversation of it, and you've been having these conversations. And I think a great way to start with this advocacy is I just have conversations about it, and because I think I've learned so much, and I hope my listeners have learned so much, and it's really valuable information, and this is necessary advocacy. This is our world. And it's a very much like an able-bodied world. It's like
it is,
privilege we see everywhere that until you have the conversation, you don't think about it.
We really need to recognize that the world historically was not designed for someone with a disability. So if you were born with a disability, you grow up with the expectation that you will have to adapt everything in your world. That you will have to advocate, that you will have to ask for accommodations. And that is exhausting, and that takes a toll on mental health to live in a world that was not designed for me. It's always an afterthought. It's always, oh, okay, we'll put a ramp on as an afterthought or as something later. And so that's why I love talking about universal design as well. Just creating more accessible spaces for everyone. Like, why is it 2021 and I have the most difficult time finding an apartment because none of them are accessible? It's like if they were universally designed, you could rent it to someone with a disability or someone without a disability. It wouldn't make a difference.
Right. Yeah.
Or why do we need to, just there are so many different examples, and I'm not going to go into depth on that, but I do want to point out that you said that advocacy starts with talking, and that's what we need to do. We need to challenge our biases. I have biases against, people that I am working to challenge all the time. That, if someone is experiencing a medical condition or anything that I'm not familiar with, I try to challenge myself and say, okay, why am I just now learning about this? Like, why is this something that I didn't already know? Why do we not have education on this in the community already? Am I making any assumptions? Let me really sit with that. Let me think about, what it's like for someone with a visual impairment or autism or, a chronic illness, and where are my biases and how can I address those and how can I challenge those and work on those? So even myself as a wheelchair user, I'm doing this work all the time. We all have to do it. We all have to sit with ourselves and be able to be like, okay, why do I think it's okay that this isn't accessible? Where does that come from? Why am I so uncomfortable around someone with a disability? Why do I feel like I feel bad for them? Why do I look at their spouse and think, oh my gosh, they must be a saint to be with that person in a wheelchair? Where does that come from? Why do I have those thoughts? Why do I feel bad for that mother of a child with a disability who, looks like they're really happy on the playground, but my instinct is to really feel bad for them? Where does that come from? So I want people to ask themselves, where does that come from?
I love that. Yeah.
What is that? Is that from stereotypes? Is that from the way that you were raised? Is that from some experiences that you've had in school? For you to think that, people with disabilities aren't deserving of equal rights and opportunities, and that, that you think that maybe that they are better off only around other people with disabilities. Like, where does that come from? Like,
Yeah.
no, like, we really need to be doing that active work all the time. And it's okay if you're not perfect. I'm not perfect, like, it's okay if you're not sure how to talk to someone with a disability. It's okay if you mess up. It's okay if you say, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I was leaning on your wheelchair as my, like people like touch wheelchairs or lean on them, and they might say, oh my gosh, I didn't even realize I was doing that. That's like your personal space. I'm sorry. The person with the wheelchair will probably say, that's okay. Thanks for like acknowledging that,
Right. Yeah.
and so it's okay. I mean, at least I would say that, it's okay if you accidentally use the term handicapped and then someone says, that's kind of an outdated term. We don't use that for people. People are not handicapped. People have a disability. Or, if they do identify in that way, that's okay. We just need to respect that and be able to say, you tell me how you identify. I don't want to make assumptions.
I love that.
I want people to really do that work and ask themselves what is leading to their perceptions of disability. And if they make a mistake and offend someone, it's okay. You're doing the work. That's bound to happen. You might be unaware of something. You might perceive something in not the most politically correct way. You may not realize something. You may realize, well, my store isn't accessible, but there's another store on the block, so I don't see the problem, right? Like, you may have those moments where you might engage in that type of ableist thinking and not even realize that it's ableist, but I want you to think about that and be conscious and to really dive internally and say, is that ableist? Is that something that maybe I should think about? So be curious with what you're thinking and what you're saying and how you're living your life. It's okay if you're not perfect. I don't want people to feel like they have to be perfect, because then they usually shut down and it's hard to even engage, right? And, this conversation is not to make anyone without a disability feel guilty. This conversation is not to make anyone without a disability feel like they're doing something wrong. This is not about that. When I speak about this and I do presentations, I say this is not to make someone without a disability here feel guilty. That only drives people further apart. If we are talking about these subjects with the intention of, blaming people or making people feel like they're doing something wrong, that is going to drive us further and further apart. We're going to be more divided. We are going to be more divided. And that doesn't help anyone. That really doesn't help either side. So we need to build meaningful connections with people where we can have these conversations where nobody is blamed, nobody is judged. We're just honoring space to learn about each other, to learn about things.
That's so beautiful. I really love that. And I love, the word I was thinking too was curious. And then you said curious, but I love the, where did this come from? Like, where did this come from? Why did I have that thought? And just listening and being aware of, why did I feel that certain way? Why did I have this reaction to this? And approaching it with a curiosity. And I think that opens up that dialogue and that brings those walls down to where we are able to have those conversations, because we are approaching it with curiosity. And it's really that where did that come from is like getting to the root of the bias. Like, and the more questions you ask, the more you're like, oh, I had this reaction. I had this feeling about this certain situation. And the more you ask those questions, like, you're going further down to the root of where that bias began. And I think
exactly. And that's therapy. That's literally therapy, right? Is, why do you have these negative internal beliefs about yourself? Why do you have these negative internal beliefs about other people with disabilities? Or, where does that come from? I feel like I use that word a lot. And, it's easy to say, I'm not sure, I don't know. And, that's okay. But we have to continue to be curious. We have to journal and think about it and take a break from our busy lives all day to have some processing and some reflection. So by all means, if you're struggling with this, you're not alone. Maybe talk to a counselor. Maybe talk to someone. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. I hate the mental health stigma. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but
We need
you know,
to like four
yeah,
more conversations because we have a
right.
lot.
Yeah. But I want people to talk to a counselor or another trusted adult or mental health provider or a trusted friend or anyone to better themselves, for their own mental health and for disability advocacy, but also advocacy for any type of minority. Because if you can master this process for how you perceive people with disabilities, that is extremely transferable to how you may perceive people who identify as LGBTQIA, people who have religious minorities, people of color, people
Yes,
of different ethnic minorities, people that have people of different races, people of different socioeconomic statuses. Whether you're Republican, Democrat, I don't care what you are, but we can all understand that some people have different realities than us. We
right,
don't have to agree on political decisions or actions or policies, but we do all have the responsibility to recognize that some people live with a different reality than us,
right.
especially people with disabilities. That's what this whole conversation is about. But
Mhm.
the point is that if you can master this, where does that come from? Why do I feel this way? Why is that my
Yeah,
belief system? You will be a better person, a better citizen of the world because you'll be more accepting. I don't care how you identify politically, but you can be a kinder human. You
yeah,
can be a kinder person in the world. I mean, we need people that can spread a little bit of kindness and just a little bit of acceptance.
definitely. Yeah, that's wonderful. I think this is a great place to wrap up. I think
Sure.
that's kind of like our theme of the conversation was just really opening up the dialogue and having a conversation about it. And I think
Mhm.
that's a great place to start, a beautiful place to start. Where can people connect with you and where can they find you, Lauren?
Absolutely. So, like I said, I love connecting with everyone from all different backgrounds. I really encourage you to go on www.riveroakspsychology.com. My email address is Lauren, that's just LAUREN, at riveroakspsychology.com. I'm also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Honestly, just Google Lauren Presutti and my name will come up on the first search results because I love when I can connect with people and I encourage you to get a hold of me. Like I said, I am doing a ton of presentations right now and a ton of support groups, but I want to grow. I really do. Once I can get things under my belt a little bit more as summer approaches here now, I'm really honored to connect with people and seeking additional opportunities. And so I'm thankful for you, Natalie, and all the work that you're doing with Notes by Natalie, and for letting me just have a little bit of space on your channel today. I am
Yes.
so glad that we had this conversation.
I am too. This has honestly been an amazing experience, and I think these conversations are so important. So it was an honor to have you. Really, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.